Hello guys, and welcome to another video, and we're back to the Keystone highlight series after a bit of a break for some other videos. And if you're new to the channel or to this series, it aims to cover many of Path of Exile's Keystone passive skills, look at their mechanics and their interactions, and of course their various use cases in different builds. And if you're interested, you can find the full playlist right here. Now this Keystone highlight is all about mind over matter. And this Keystone is really one of those classic passive skills that defines an entire build archetype, that being mana stacking. But most mana stacking builds are not in the best of places right now, and this is largely due to the trade-off of how powerful auras and other reservation skills are, and the fact that most builds wanting to stack mana and make use of the mind over matter Keystone will want to have a sizable mana pool. So these builds either reserve no mana or reserve relatively low amount of mana compared to the majority of other builds right now, which reserve most if not all of their mana pools. Mind over matter is located towards the top left of the core passive tree, right between the Witch and Templar start location, and it's also granted by the Cloak of Defiance unique body armor. So mind over matter has just one modifier. 40% of damage is taken from mana before life. So this is a defensive mechanic which allows your mana pool to act as an extension to your life pool, so that it absorbs a portion of the incoming damage. This modifier will fully function for all types of damage, but importantly, it will only interact with damage that would otherwise impact your life. Let's take a look at a basic example for mind over matter. A character with 5,000 life and 2,500 mana has mind over matter allocated. The character takes a hit of 2,000 damage after mitigation. 40% of the damage is dealt to mana before life, so 800 damage is dealt to mana, and the remaining 1,200 damage is dealt to life. So the character has 3,800 life and 1,700 mana remaining after the damage has been taken. You can see in this example how the mind over matter Keystone has essentially increased the life pool of the character, where mana is acting as an extension of life. But what happens when a much larger amount of damage is taken? Let's say the same character instead takes a hit of 7,000 damage after mitigation. 40% of the damage is taken from mana before life, so 2,800 damage is dealt to mana, but the character only has 2,500 mana available, and therefore the remaining 300 must be dealt to life after mana is fully depleted, along with the 4,200 damage that wasn't redirected to mana to begin with. So the character has 500 life and 0 mana remaining after the damage has been taken. You can see in this example that when there is an insufficient amount of mana to be able to absorb the redirected damage, it will be dealt to life instead. This interaction creates an important ratio for life and mana totals so that you can most efficiently make use of mind over matter. In this case, you want to make sure that you do not run out of mana before life when taking damage. Therefore, if you have 40% of damage taken from mana before life from mind over matter, you'll need an unreserved mana pool of at least 67% of unreserved life. And with this ratio, you'd run out of both resources at the same time when taking damage, without factoring in recovery. However, there are other stats you can gain which also apply a percentage of damage taken from mana before life, and these stats stack additively with each other and with mind over matter. For example, the Hierophant's Divine Guidance Ascendancy notable provides 10% of damage taken from mana before life, while the Ascendant's Hierophant notable provides 8%. You can find a modifier on Watcher's Eye Jewels which grants up to 10% of damage taken from mana before life while using Clarity. And the Arladek's unique amulet has a modifier which grants 1% of damage taken from mana before life per power charge. There's also a Betrayal suffix modifier that can be found on body armor, which provides up to 22% of damage taken from mana before life while focused when unveiled, and up to 15% when crafted. These modifiers can be stacked to have a high percentage of damage taken from mana before life, and this is going to drastically change the ratio of life and mana so that you can ensure that you won't run out of mana before life. For example, let's say a Hierophant has Divine Guidance and Mind over Matter allocated, and is using the Clarity aura along with a Watcher's Eye modifier for damage taken from life before mana while using Clarity. This Hierophant has a total of 60% of damage taken from mana before life, and therefore they'll need an unreserved mana pool of at least 150% of unreserved life to ensure that they cannot run out of mana before life, assuming both resources are full. For example, let's say this Hierophant has 4,000 life and 6,000 mana, therefore mana is 150% of life. If they took a hit large enough to kill them, they'd run out of both resources at the same time. So, a hit of 10,000 damage is taken after mitigation. 60% of the damage is dealt to mana before life, so 6,000 damage is dealt to mana, fully depleting it, and 4,000 damage is dealt to life, fully depleting it. This graph shows the percentage of damage dealt to mana before life stat that you have, and the corresponding mana to life ratio that you need to have to ensure that you won't run out of mana before life. You can see that as you continue to stack this stat, you can invest more and more into mana that you would have otherwise needed to invest into life. And this is very powerful because mana stacking can also be used offensively through the use of things such as the Archmage support gem, which grants base lightning damage based on mana spent, with mana cost based on a percentage of unreserved maximum mana, or the Arcane Cloak guard skill, which spends a large percentage of your mana to grant a buff which provides you with an offensive and defensive boost. The offensive part of the buff grants flat lightning damage based on a portion of mana spent, while the defensive part grants a shield which will absorb a percentage of damage from hits that you take before your life or energy shield. Speaking of energy shield, or this defensive part of the Arcane Cloak ability, if you have another resource which can absorb damage before life, such as energy shield, ward, guard skills, Aegis skills, and similar effects, these will absorb damage before life as they come first in the order of operations for receiving damage, and they don't interact in any way with Mind Over Matter or other sources of damage taken from mana before life. This is because this stat only functions for damage that would cause life to be lost. For example, a character has 500 energy shield, 3000 life, and 1000 mana with Mind Over Matter allocated. This character takes 2000 non-chaos damage after mitigation. The energy shield will absorb damage first, so 500 damage is dealt to energy shield, then the remaining 1500 damage would be dealt to life, which means 40% of that damage is then dealt to mana first because of Mind Over Matter. So 600 damage is dealt to mana, and 900 damage is dealt to life. This means that Mind Over Matter and other sources of damage taken from mana before life have no synergy with Chaos Inoculation because the effect only interacts with damage that would cause life loss. Mind Over Matter does have a lot of synergy with the Agnostic Keystone, however, as this provides extreme life recovery based on a percentage of mana if you're not on full life. With the combination of these two keystones, you can heavily invest into mana recovery as your primary recovery source for both mana and life, and this also means that you can make great use of mana flasks, perhaps even foregoing life flasks altogether, because as long as your mana is healthy, then Mind Over Matter will always be able to absorb a portion of incoming damage before life, while the Agnostic will be available to recover your life back to full whenever you do take damage. Indigon is a unique helmet which has powerful modifiers that combine well with these two keystones. Defensively, it allows non-instant mana recovery from flasks to also recover life, which puts less pressure on mana recovery to restore life through the Agnostic, while offensively, if you're able to recover enough mana and pay the increasing skill costs, it can provide an incredible increase to spell damage. It's important to have good mana recovery when using Mind Over Matter, as you'll likely be using mana on large skill costs and Arcane Cloak, and you'll want to recover mana as quickly as possible so that this resource is always available when you need it for absorbing damage. Mana regeneration will be the go-to method for high mana recovery on many mana stacking builds. All characters have a base mana regeneration of 1.8% per second. The Clarity Aura will provide flat mana regeneration, while stats like this one on the Cloak of Defiance unique body armor grant mana regeneration based on a percentage of maximum mana. Any increases to mana regeneration rate will increase your total mana regeneration from all sources of flat and percentage-based mana regeneration. Mana flasks can have a modifier called Enduring, which prevents the mana recovery from the flask from stopping when maximum recoverable mana is reached, providing a constant stream of mana recovery. While Mana Recoup will provide a percentage of damage taken from hits recovered as mana over 4 seconds, like this modifier on the Battle Rouse notable passive skill. Mind Over Matter also has synergy with Eldritch Battery. This is a keystone which makes your energy shield protect mana instead of life, and therefore any damage which is taken from mana before life from Mind Over Matter or other sources will cause this portion of damage to be dealt to the energy shield that's now protecting mana first, before the mana itself. In the case that chaos damage is being taken by mana before life, it will bypass the energy shield by default. This combination of mechanics can be extremely powerful because it means that you can potentially use energy shield as the resource that Mind Over Matter will redirect damage to. And that means you can take full advantage of all of the energy shield scaling mechanics, and things like energy shield leech. But do be aware that damage taken to energy shield will stop and prevent energy shield from recharging, so you'll need to find reliable sources of energy shield recovery. A great example of a build using this combination of keystones would be a Hierophant with the Divine Guidance notable and the Sanctuary of Thought notable. Even without additional investment into maximum mana, the Hierophant is able to use the increased mana reservation efficiency of skills on the Sanctuary of Thought notable to reserve all of their mana against powerful auras or other reservation skills, and still gain a large amount of flat energy shield from the gain 20% of maximum mana as extra maximum energy shield modifier. They can then use Divine Guidance and Mind Over Matter's mana before life modifiers together with Eldritch Battery and Energy Shield Leech to provide a strong defensive setup. There are a few other special modifiers that can be found on some unique items which provide the damage taken from mana before life stat, but only for a single damage type. The Mind of the Council unique helmet provides 30% of lightning damage taken from mana before life. This modifier will also stack additively with any other sources or types of damage taken from mana before life. So if you had this helmet and a total of 70% of damage taken from mana before life, then 100% of the lightning damage that you take will be taken from mana before life. There's also the Ivory Tower unique body armor, which has a similar stat, which instead makes all of the chaos damage you take be taken from mana before life. Overall, Mind Over Matter is a great keystone which can provide a large boost to effective health for builds heavily utilizing mana as a resource for both offense and defense. The keystone is unlikely to be of much use for the large majority of builds that aren't investing into mana or energy shield with Eldritch Battery, as it doesn't provide any kind of defensive benefit beyond offering mana as an extension of life. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thank you to my current channel members. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can support the growth of this channel too by joining them. Click the join button below to find out more. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.